Nice Radio, Callaloo presents Just Another Look. Just Another Look is an innovative, exciting, albeit decidedly provocative, yes, certainly controversial, socio-political analysis of issues of a local, regional, and international nature. Just Another Look is heard only on Night Radio. First aired on Saturdays at 6 p.m., with repeat broadcasts on Sundays at 9 p.m. You can catch us on the World Wide Web, www.nightradio.info. We are on our blog, and we are also YouTube. I am, of course, Keith Joseph. Today, dear friends, is Saturday. It is the 11th day of July 2020. Welcome to another edition of your favorite program, Just Another Look. We want to focus our attention for the most part in today's program on the extent to which St. Vincent and the Grenadines is very much a plantation. It is still very much a plantation society. And it is not at all surprising that on the eve of general elections 2020, the ruling regime is essentially offering the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines what we label plantation love boxes. Plantation love boxes. Your last meal for the vote. Plantation love boxes. Your last meal for the vote. It seems that our country, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, has become almost transfixed on allowing itself to be once more a plantation. This time, it appears to be a plantation of Ralph Gonsalves and his minions. You would have heard from time to time Senator Sinclair Leacock insisting one occasion after another, we are not on your plantation. We are not on your plantation. But that does not mean that we are not a plantation. He's seeking to inform the nation to apply their critical thinking skills and to reject what appears to be a continued effort to manage to control St. Vincent and the Grenadines as if it is one's personal plantation. When one listens to the naked political tribalism vented by the goodly doctor and his minions, one immediately recognizes the travesty that passes for governance and democracy in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This country was once promised, for example, that a ULP government would lead to the establishment of a consultative democracy. A number of documents were produced aimed at giving the impression that there was some structured plan to establish a consultative democracy in St. Vincent and the Grenadines once the Unity Labour Party won at the polls. But if one were to examine what has happened to Vincentian society since 2001, one would recognize that it's one thing to make promises as a political party going into an election. It is another thing to carry out those promises. And what you've had from the Unity Labour Party over time is a careful selection of those promises it wished to keep and those promises it wished to ignore. We have identified in the past several promises, and perhaps they were never intended to be kept. Perhaps they were only designed to fool the electorate into believing, literally, vote for me and we'll set you free. Unfortunately, people are waking up to the reality. They are waking up to an understanding that much of what was in the 2001 manifesto and several of the subsequent manifestos were really designed as fluff, padding, in order to try to convince sections of the electorate, stay with us, because if you're with us, you'll not only own the campaign, we'll own the jobs too. That comes out of their own mouths. Own the jobs too. But perhaps Dr. Gonzalez and his ULP minions may have established a consultative democracy of sorts. Maybe they did. But if they did, they failed to inform the nation as a whole precisely who are involved in this consultative democracy, because it is certainly not the country. It is certainly not the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And we want to give you two quick examples. One is that Vincent Beach was attempting to engage people in the rural communities in a discussion on the use of arms. And so they started along, he and the Commissioner of Police, trying to have consultations. Well, the people actually laughed them to scorn. They attempted to have consultations and nobody came, because people, even back then, saw through the facade. They knew it was just a gimmick and nobody bothered with them. They talked about an arms amnesty, and again, nobody took them seriously because they knew exactly what it was: a sham, a facade. And the second example was the budget consultation. The ministry prepares its budget and then it starts a consultation. And people are saying, well, hello, if you're consulting us, you consult us at the beginning of the process, not at the end of the process. And soon enough, they found out that when those who took the time to go to the first consultation on the budget that took place at the Peace Memorial Hall, soon enough realized, but this is not a consultation. This is a defense of what the government has virtually already decided. And so, soon enough, the so-called budget consultations came to an end insofar as its usage of the Peace Memorial Hall was concerned. They recognized that nobody was coming because the people, again, as with the arms amnesty, etc., knew what was really going on. And so they didn't bother to participate. And the next thing you know, the Minister of Finance, who was also the Prime Minister, decided that the consultation will take place using NBC radio. So he went and he sat down in the office. And when he realized that nobody took him seriously and nobody was even bothering with him, he then started to ask himself the questions and then answer it. So you got a kind of line like, I know some of you may be wanting to ask this question, so let me respond to it. Because nobody was asking him anything. They recognized too that was a facade. It was all sham. And so they've been, since then, oh yes, how could we forget the referendum, the Constitution, yeah? And the youth of this country exposed everything. The youth of the country says, hello, they invited us to be part of the consultation on the proposed new constitution. And guess what? Nothing we recommended found its way into the final document that was presented. But we should have known that. We should have known that it was not really an exercise in anything but futility. It was not intended really to be a consultative process. And the public vehemently rejected the final document. Pierre could continue to say how much it hurt him personally. He should understand why it was rejected. If he doesn't understand that, he should never have attempted to enter politics. So this country was once promised a consultative democracy, and in very short order must have come to a recognition that was not going to happen, not on Gonzalez's plantation, not on the plantation of Gonzalez and his minions. Perhaps the most fundamental truth is that Gonzalez may well have fashioned a ULP consultative democracy of sorts that involved naught but the ULP themselves. The plantation of which we speak in this week's program is akin to and a legacy of the original plantation of the slave era in the Caribbean. That is what has been revisited upon us. That is what has been revisited upon us. On this plantation, color matters as was the case in the original slave plantation. Color matters. On this plantation, people of the lighter hue are almost automatically deemed superior to all other colors and possessive of some sort of divine right to rule over the rest of us. They wear their color with a certain justification, with a sense of entitlement that is the most enduring legacy of slavery. That sense of entitlement by virtue of one's color. Importantly, the leaders of the plantation take unto themselves a sense of hubris that allows for no criticism, no challenges. They virtually deem themselves infallible. They can say and do nothing wrong. They have no apologies to make to anyone for anything because they never do wrong. They never make mistakes. If ever something happens to be shown to be wrong, then for sure it could not possibly be the fault of the leader. It has to be someone else's fault. Never, never the fault of the leader. Perhaps we can cite a case in point in the recent matter of the Prime Minister's Facebook page saying one thing that he's alleged to have said, and he then disclaiming that that is not what he said. And that's interesting. But it goes to the very heart of the plantation society. and the perception of near infallibility. Eyewitness News quoted the Prime Minister as saying, quote, "Apparently, on my Facebook page, the person who manages that, I haven't looked to see whether what the NDP is saying is true. That either it was said or it was suggested that we had the funding from the World Bank. And if my Facebook page said that, that's an inaccuracy. But they should take what I have said out of my own mouth repeatedly. But the one side shows, you see? End of quote. You know, people who deem themselves almost infallible have this particular type of problem. What is important here is the reaction of the Prime Minister. His reaction is what we knew to have on the plantation in slavery. The plantation owner is in control. So it is not at all possible for him to make a mistake. But that is the norm on the plantation, regardless of what historical period we are talking about. And it doesn't matter if we recall that it was once said, quote unquote, I may lie about certain things. Yeah? It doesn't matter, because we were never told what are the things he would lie about or given any indication when he was going to be lying about those certain things. But imagine, dear friends, that a Prime Minister dares to say, as quoted by Eyewitness News, apparently on my Facebook page, the persons who manages that, the persons who in other words, absolve me, because I don't really I don't manage my Facebook page. So why do you have a Facebook page? You are so full of yourself and so highly positioned that, okay, you have somebody managing your Facebook page. I haven't looked to see whether what the NDP is saying is true. So it doesn't matter really. The NDP is saying they got this from your Facebook page. You are saying, well, I haven't even looked at that, I haven't even looked at that. There's somebody managing that. So there's this utter, it comes across as total arrogance. That you should understand, dear listeners, that it doesn't matter if my Facebook says something else. I am telling you that I didn't even bother to look at whether what they're accusing me of, as per the Facebook page, is true. It doesn't matter, because I am here now talking to you. That is essentially what he's saying. He admitted that he did not even check to see whether what the NDP is saying about what was posted is true. Does that not smack of arrogance? Does that not smack of the kind of behavior of the plantation owner of old? Nothing has changed. Gonzalez appears to be so sure of himself and apparently believes so much in his own infallibility that he did not even think it necessary and or important to check the Facebook page, his own Facebook page, for himself to see whether the NDP was making a correct reference. Because they are not important. That is his perception. That is the analysis we have to make. To him, they do not seem important enough for him to go and check to see if their point of reference says what they say it says. That is unimportant. Yeah? Is it that their apparent arrogance compels him to insist without checking that if by chance the NDP is speaking the truth, then his own Facebook page is wrong? One would then have insisted that one would check the post, make the appropriate correction, apologize to the NDP, and then refer to the truth. But you see, to do so would be to suggest that there is a certain fallibility. That is not what happens on the plantation. On the plantation, the kind of aforementioned option is unacceptable because it may be seen as a chink in the armor of the plantation owner. And it is important that this not be the case, not even by perception. So the only acceptable approach is to insist that even if the NDP was accurate in what they read on his Facebook page, that is wrong. What is on the Facebook page is inaccurate. So why is it there? Why is it there? We don't have the modicum of humility to say, well, okay, you're right. And maybe I should apologize because if something is there that I deem inaccurate and I didn't even check it for myself, then let me take the blame. But let me tell you what I really intend and what I always say. But no, you see, such an approach may be interpreted from his vantage point as perhaps a sign of weakness. And his perception may well be, well, what would people think of me if I start to show signs of weakness? But Eyewitness News has Gonzalez saying, quote, and if my Facebook page said that, that's an inaccuracy. Well, then apologize now. Apologize. But he goes on to say, but they should take what I have said out of my own mouth repeatedly, but the one side shows, you see, eh? So understand the thinking. Understand the workings of the mind, the political machinations of his mind. Yeah? The plantation owner cannot afford, even if the person handling his Facebook page, which is supposed to reflect him, makes a mistake, he's not prepared really to apologize. Huh? But they should take what I have said out of my mouth repeatedly. So there's no apology there. And then he goes on to the politics. But the one side shows. The one side shows. There's no side show. It is that there has to be some measure of consistency. And so we ask listeners, you be the judge. And ask yourselves as you're doing that, whether or not you believe Gonzalez is for real. Is he for real? And if my Facebook page said that, that's an inaccuracy. But they should take what I have said out of my own mouth repeatedly. But the one side shows, you see? Eh? We ask you, dear listeners, is this not sheer arrogance? Is this not bordering on sheer stupidity? If the information on your Facebook page is wrong, how is anyone but yourself to know that this is indeed the case? Is it not blatant arrogance to declare that what is on your page is an inaccuracy if what the NDP says is true? And if my Facebook page said that, that's an inaccuracy. but they should take what I have said out of my own mouth repeatedly. So what is this sideshow that he is presuming them to be taking? What is this sideshow? But you see, the pattern here on the plantation. The plantation owners and controllers can't think and act in any other way. It's the only way they know. It is as if they have all been socialized. They have all been conditioned into this way of behaving. And we have been this way before. The behavior is much the same. You remember the situation where Kenton Chance and Eyewitness News attended the daily briefing in respect of our response to the coronavirus. He gets that update at 6 p.m. But after 10 in the evening, or around 10 o'clock the evening, Little Boy Blue, the Minister of Health, Little Boy Blue puts something on his personal post. And the interpretation of what is posted and how it is posted left Kenton Chance believing that there was an additional case. It is a matter of the use of English. Not all of us are proficient at that, apparently. Yeah? So while Little Boy Blue was suggesting that he never said on his Facebook page that there was an additional case, Chance was saying, but if we had the official update at 6 p.m., and this was the information given, and the way in which you have written on your Facebook page 4 hours later, wasn't that possible or intended for it to be interpreted in a particular way? But Little Boy Blue, like Dr. Salt, they appear to have this sense of ownership and control of the plantation. That the slaves have to just accept whatever they say because they are the plantation owners and controllers. It is their place. It is their society. And how dare you, whether you're a journalist or otherwise, how dare you attempt to suggest otherwise? We know what we're saying and why we are saying it, and you don't have any choice but to accept what we are saying. It's not just the journalists that they believe they control. They would like to control just about the whole society, apparently. So what is the difference in the responses of Little Boy Blue on the one hand and Dr. Salt on the other? You be the judge. But just another look insists that this is the expected behavior of those in control of the plantation. They can create, literally out of thin air, all sorts of explanations when it seems to suit their fancies, and more importantly, when it seeks to suit their political pride and purposes. Of course, it may well be that the person managing the Facebook page made an error. But even if that were the case, the way in which the Prime Minister appears to have been prepared to treat the NDP's political response should have necessitated a humbler approach. But humility does not readily appear to be a characteristic of the plantation owner. It is not an accepted principle on the plantation. Nice. Real nice. And we ask, is that the infallibility option? But isn't it remarkable that one would be the prime minister of a country, have a Facebook page, fully cognizant of all of the issues attendant to Facebook over the years, and particularly in the recent past, and not pay due attention to what is placed on this very page that bears your name, and perhaps, just perhaps, what you want to convey to the readers and viewers? Isn't it remarkable? And you see, we are supposed to just take it because Papa says so. I mean, how dare you think otherwise? That is the situation with the plantation owner and controller. They are never wrong. They are never wrong. Nothing has changed after 600 years. All that has happened really is that the current plantation owners have been born in the Caribbean. That's all. But they are the successors. They are the inheritors of those who engage in conquest. The Vincentian plantation of today virtually guarantees the loyal supporters of the owners and controllers the benefits that accrue as a result of the assumed work of the leadership and the party. It's no different. That's why we could have had one of their leaders declaring at a convention that we must own the jobs too. In other words, those most loyal to the owners and controllers of the plantation are the ones who would become house slaves. They're the ones who will get the jobs. They're the ones who will benefit financially from the quality of the jobs they get. And in return, what is required of them is the same blind loyalty. They become the gatekeepers of the plantation. And it is the reason why people have become scared of speaking for so long in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Because they felt that walls have ears. Anything you say by way of a criticism will soon enough return to the ears of the leadership, of the plantation owners and controllers. But if you notice, over time, that has changed. Because when people get fed up, they then speak out. And that is why so many people are calling into radio programs now that have never done so before. That is why there's a higher level of articulacy in the comments made by people of importance in the society. There are some people who are writing letters to the editor now who would not have done so in the past, and understand the messages that they are bringing. They're not engaging in political affiliation communication. They are concerned about the well-being of their country, and they have watched the perpetuation of the plantation system in its most insidious form. So that one set of people are supposed to benefit. One set of people. And the rest, they don't care if you starve. Because the one good thing that the plantation owners and controllers have been able to do from conquest has always been to divide and rule the peoples that they control. They make people dislike each other. They divide families. In fact, they destroyed families. And they still are today. In the same household, people are pitted against each other because of the tribalistic nature of the politics. Because some know that they alone will eat the fruits of labor. They alone. And they don't care if their brother, sister, mother, or father don't get. As long as they get. So we thrive on the near-nativistic approach that was perpetuated from slavery. They thrive on the persistence of poverty while claiming to alleviate it. If you run a system that only allows a small minority or a particularly loyal group to enjoy the benefits, to own the jobs, then you are creating poverty for those who are not among that group. So while speaking of alleviating poverty, you may very well be creating poverty. So the poverty divide in the country may well be closely aligned to the political tribalism that exists in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It's the same with the plantation. Nothing has changed after 600 years. If only, perhaps it has become more insidious. The Vincentian plantation of today, dear friends, is as much of a total institution as that which was characterized by Raymond T. Smith and George Beckford, labeled the plantation of old. They use Irving Goffman's social psychological concept of a total institution to describe the plantation society in the height of slavery. Everything on the plantation, all aspects of life, were dictated by the plantation owners and controllers. All aspects of life. Nothing was left to chance. Do you see anything different today? Do you see anything different today? Only the owners and controllers of the plantation believe that they have the right to dictate what happens to your life in the society. Every aspect of life is impacted by the plantation, and by extension, by the plantation owners and controllers. It is difficult to claim, dear friends, very difficult to claim, that anyone possessive of any modicum of good sense and critical thinking skills would fail to see that the Unity Labour Party has, since taking office, not in any way taken seriously the fact that constitutionally the opposition members in Parliament are part of the legislative arm of government in tandem with the government members. It is one House of Assembly that constitutes the legislature, not two separate units. But you hear them, those on that side, those on this side, those on that side. Yeah? And we have created a system that suggests that should one individual member apply his own conscience, even apply perhaps the desires of his own constituents, should they go contrary to what the one side is adopting, then you dare not used the parliamentary forum to make that case. Not long after that, you may find yourself outside of Parliament. That is the democratic process that we have here. So it is not about representing your people. It is about doing what you think, you and your party think, is in the best interest of your continued control of the plantation. That is what you are representing in Parliament. The people, you will then sell it to them afterwards. Yeah? You will sell it to them afterwards. But James Mitchell said, you elect me to lead, not to follow. One is not sure which part of the Bible he read. One has to understand the fundamentals of leadership. Paulo Freire, in Pedagogy of the Oppressed, explained to us all the requirements of genuine leadership, how it is people-centered, and how it works with people to allow people to make their own decisions that then guide the quality of representation that they get. No, we have it the other way around. They elect with the lead, and by God, we're going to lead. Wherever we lead, you got to follow. That's why we have no federation. That's why, despite of all of the cockamamie nonsense that we have heard from the new chairman of CARICOM, we know that CARICOM is a failed institution. It's not going to change because you're in charge. It's the same cockamamie kind of storylines we got when he became chairman of the shareholder governments of Liat. Remember, we go everywhere. We're on the cusp because he's in charge. We're on the cusp. We were going to get jets, remember? We were going to get jets. The same kind of cockamamie story. We did not even put one nail in the land yet. Drive one drill in the land. But we started counting our chickens about how much geothermal energy we would produce. So much so that we may even be able to sell to Barbados. The people go on. Yeah? And we always finding all sorts of excuses, you know. Because there's no need for owners of the plantation to apologize to anybody. There's no need. From the very first sitting of the House of Assembly after the ULP-1 elections in 2001, the Unity Labour Party has never treated the opposition as having a role in the shaping of the nation's legislative agenda. Never. And that is still the case today after almost 20 years in office. But we must be mindful that government in the Anglophone Caribbean, the English-speaking Caribbean, has three constituent parts. The executive, which is the cabinet of ministers, the legislature, which is all the members of parliament, and the judiciary, which is the court system. They're supposed to have relative independence of each other. But in our system, as in the case of most of the countries that are members of the Commonwealth, former colonies of the United Kingdom, these three branches are not as independent of each other as they are supposed to be. Experience and practice have shown that there are just too many areas of overlap, too many areas of gray. It's not all black and white. We know from experience, for example, that while there's collective responsibility in cabinet, what we have in the country is essentially prime ministerial governance. As a lecturer in political economy, as a political activist, Gonzalez has always talked about the excessive powers of the Prime Minister. And we ask you today, dear listeners, to determine for yourself whether or not, during his tenure so far, he has exploited all of the possible options in respect of the powers of the Prime Minister. Remember when he said Prime Minister means first? Okay. You ask and you determine for yourself whether he ever thought that the concept of first among equals ever entered his cranium. That he just first, not first among equals. But they've used that to tell us and control us as the plantation owners of whole. That's why he could have get up and say, Gerald Thompson, arguably the brightest member of parliament. He must have been just laughing his head off when he said that. What exactly was he telling the nation? What exactly was he telling the nation? One can hardly find a Caribbean country, dear friends, in which people genuinely believe that the political leadership do not influence the judiciary. Hardly any country. Hardly any country. People understand very clearly that those who control the government work extremely hard to try to ensure that they can almost, once a case comes up, they can almost tell you how it's supposed to end up. And then since so many of the ministers of government are lawyers, that make it even worse. Similarly, dear friends, it is difficult to find anyone in this part of the world that believes that in Parliament, the government side ever really takes seriously anything that the opposition places before it. They know what is in the Constitution. They know that together they constitute the House of Assembly, the legislative arm of government. But they don't ever behave that way. It is our way or the highway. In the recent situation in Parliament, where time ran out on the opposition with regard to its motion, witness the reaction of the plantation owners. Did you get the impression that essentially their approach was, we catch them, boys, we catch them again. We catch them, we check them. You get that impression? If they, in principle, that together you constitute the legislative arm of government, should you not be making a greater effort to display unity in the legislative agenda of the country? Should you not be eager to listen to each other with a level of sincerity and objectivity? Shouldn't you? Shouldn't you? But here, in a similar vein, whenever the opposition agrees with the government then virtually seizes the opportunity to humiliate the members of the opposition, as if they are declaring, well, they didn't really have a choice. They know our proposal was the best, etc., etc. You may recall that when the opposition agreed to additional financial allocations for the completion of the Argyle International Airport, ULP and their minions were quick to laud the fact that the opposition was only doing so because their efforts at objecting to the airport failed. And now that it was being realized, they didn't have a choice, so they tried to come on board. And you know, when you talk to people, they tell you, oh, that is politics. Sad, isn't it? So politics is really about grandstanding. It is not an image building. It is not about genuinely running the country or showing concern for the country or even trying to unite the country. That's not what it's about. It is about dividing the country as much as is possible by belittling the opposition wherever they are. Because that is the only way you can stay in government. Isn't that what we get? What is the difference between that and the plantation of gold? It did not seem to matter, dear friends, to the plantation owners and controllers that they are not the only ones allowed to conduct political rallies, that they were the only ones who were allowed to conduct political rallies on the airport site while the facilities were under construction. A political party gets sold to a government project that you said was a national project, but only you could have had political rallies for elections on it. Yeah? That's how much you value the opposition. The legislature is the nation's lawmaking body. It is only on a plantation that the owners and controllers would consistently use it as a platform to render the opposition an ineffective participant in a process designed to allow for ideas to contend to the benefit of all of the society, not just one grouping, the supporters of the ruling regime. Listeners may also recall that the opposition NDP brought to Parliament a comprehensive document on integrity legislation. This was laid in Parliament in expectation that since the introduction of integrity legislation was a campaign promise of the ULP in 2001, it would have jolted them into action. Mistake. The comprehensive nature of the proposed integrity legislation first and foremost shocked the living daylights out of the Unity Labour Party leadership. They were shocked. They were stunned. But they were not prepared and still have not been prepared to discuss it, so it's somewhere gathering dust. At the extent to which they see the opposition as a participant, as a shareholder in the legislative process in this country. It's a sham. The House of Assembly is a shameful sham of an institution. Shameful. It is a moribund institution and serves essentially as the center for a political pantomime created, directed, and produced by the ruling regime. That is what it is in reality. We fool ourselves, we delude ourselves if we deem it anything else. If we deem it anything else. The plantation owners were not prepared to allow the opposition, equal lawmakers in Parliament, the distinction of setting their agenda, or for that matter the agenda of the House, even if the issue they brought to the fore was a campaign promise of the ruling regime. even if it was their promise. Today, almost 20 years later, the plantation owners and controllers are still not in any way embarrassed that a 2001 campaign promise of introducing integrity legislation has not yet been addressed. And yet they tell you how good they are at governance. Yet a fundamental principle of good governance, integrity legislation, is yet to find its way on our legislative agenda. It is not a sufficient priority. Why? Integrity legislation allows the nation to have full disclosure on the public officials. Full disclosure. Full disclosure. We can only hazard a guess, dear friends, that the plantation owners made the promise of integrity legislation without any serious consideration of its implications for their own conduct in Parliament, and more broadly, their own conduct in Vincentian politics. Plantation owners have no place for shame. They have no room for apologies. Why? Because they are in control. Their hands are firmly planted on the levers of governance. As Glenn Jackson used to say so often, they are in power. But just another look is of the view, dear friends, that it is folly for any member of the electorate to ever believe that there is likely to be any nationwide consultative democracy during the ULP's tenure in office. Not going to happen. The concept, you see, stands in stark contradiction to what we have seen from the organization since taking office in 2001. They broker no criticism. It must always be their ideas. 20 years later, there is no evidence of any movement in this direction. The Vincentian plantation owners today remain intent on leading the populace by their noses, just as was the case in times of slavery. They behave as though only they possess ideas about development. And knowing that serious academics insist that development is about people, the populace, it is amazing to watch just how much the plantation owners are today leaving the people out of the decision-making process. They make decisions for you. You are not to be part of those decisions. Be ever grateful. Be eternally grateful. That is why, it's interesting. Because poor people, more than anybody else, poor people are appreciative of any help that helps to even appear to alleviate their poverty. Poor people find themselves in a very difficult position. And so when people give them gifts, they shower them with praises and give thanks to Almighty God for those who help them. But what we have seen in the recent past, you realize that someone in authority here was boasting of what position? What position? I'm in the top 10 for helping the poor. Hello? People do that? The only people who seem to do that are people who are heuristic, who are so concerned with themselves. It is not for you to say how many people you help. It is for the people who are helped to shower praises and give thanks to Almighty God for sending you with the help. But you're not sure that that will happen, so you take the praises and you want to put yourself on the totem pole to determine, where am I in the scheme of things? What's the difference between that and standing in front of the mirror? Mirror, mirror on the wall, am I the fairest of them all? Is that the games you're playing, bro? Is that where you reach? Huh? That you have to determine, because people not telling you, you have to determine and telling people, well, you know, I think I am on position 10 or perhaps I'm in the top 5 in terms of helping poor people. You do not do that to poor people. It is even more debilitating. Poor people do not enjoy having to beg for anything. And they do not enjoy having to beg politicians. People who grab after your love boxes and your lumber, galvanized, and cement are of two essential types. Those who are supporters of your party who believe that they have a right, they're entitled to getting it because they support you. And those who are genuinely in need and are humiliated and saddened by the fact that they have to beg for it. Those are the two types of people. But what is the intent really of the plantation owners in giving the love boxes and boasting about it? In giving people some money and boasting about it? In giving lumber, galvanized steel, and cement and boasting about what is the intention? Just another look is saying it's difficult to suggest other than the fact that it may well be intended to garner votes from one election to the next. Very difficult to say otherwise. The plantation owner appears the only source of knowledge, wisdom, understanding, and ideas for development. Listen over and over again and determine for yourself, how often have you heard other people's names mentioned as purveyors of ideas in respect of development in this country? Often it comes across as though there is a concerted effort to ensure that people see one person and one person alone as the maximum leader, a communist concept, by the way, a maximum leader, the purveyor of all ideas and the doer of all projects. So at the end of the day, it's all about me. It's all about me. Who do you give thanks and praise to? Me. Yeah? And in the midst of that, we intertwine a little bit of the religion, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, to make the people believe, listen, we are with you all the way, you know. Closer examination reveals the fact that one set of people are supposed to be the beneficiaries. Come join us. Remember, you can't leave us. You can't leave us. Come join us and understand that we are the purveyors of everything that you need for your sustenance in the society. That is what we have become, a glorified plantation 600 years removed. You know, perhaps, dear friends, had there been a national consultation, we would probably have had the international airport located in an area where the impact of the weather, particularly the sea salt, is much less than what currently obtains at Argyle. If this is to be argued, we are sure to get a response that this was considered and the decision for Argyle was unanimous. Unanimous by who? There was never any genuine attempt to render the Argyle International Airport project as a national project. From the very beginning, it was always promoted as a party project. Oh yes, there were little ads here and there to try to suggest that you were trying to get national consensus. The plantation owner already determined what was going to happen. Who made that decision again? How many of our listeners were involved in the decision-making process? Just as some people are still today worried about will they ever get paid what they thought was their just due for the land. If the plantation owners and controllers learned one thing from the referendum on the proposed new constitution, it was that they cannot trust the people with such an important decision. That's the one thing they learned. Critical thinkers, including some of the leftovers and ruminants of the left, recognized on the very evening of the referendum, while the results started to become clear, that the Vincentian masses are not stupid, and that they used the event as a referendum on the leadership of Gonzales and his ULP minions, as much as they used it as an opportunity to reject the proposed constitution. The plantation owners also understood the results of the referendum to signal to them the utter failure of any education revolution in this country. They could not come to terms with the fact that despite all that was done to give the impression that the ULP was an education government led by an education prime minister, failed to impact the decision-making process of the Vincentian electorate in respect of the referendum on the proposed new constitution. The Vincentian electorate may well have understood that the outcome of the referendum sent shockwaves through the entire plantation leadership to such an extent that there were internal challenges to what some may well have seen as maximum leadership and its obvious failure. After all, students of Caribbean politics knew of the demise of the maximum leadership style of governance in Grenada and later in Jamaica. But this did not in any way open the intellects of those who took ownership of the Vincentian plantation. They were already too socialized. The concept of plantation ownership had been too ingrained. The concept of the benevolent dictatorship had been too much ingrained. They could not extricate themselves from their own history and their own legacy. The outcome of the referendum, therefore, became the catalyst needed by the plantation owners to engage in a more systematic approach to its exercise of control over the different aspects of Vincentian society. Listeners may recall that many argue that should the ULP have won the referendum, we would have had general elections in very short order thereafter. They thought that the ULP would have been extremely eager to change the system with immediate effect. Having lost the referendum, however, the ULP sought to recoup. The ULP sought to pacify those who were upset within its ranks. However, the leadership thought they did nothing wrong and that they were not entirely responsible for the very strong rejection of the proposed new constitution. The ULP was again shocked when they lost 4 seats in the general elections more than 1 year after that referendum. They thought the referendum's licking had already been forgotten. And so they were shocked when they lost 4 seats and ended up with a 1-seat majority. The plantation owners remained at the control of the party. And the party, despite significant expenditures on artists and rallies in 2015, again failed to regain any of the 4 seats they had lost in 2010. So while the plantation owners continue to thump their chests, they have little to show substantively. But in 2 consecutive elections, in a 10-year span, they lost 4 seats that they have not been able to regain, in spite of the boast and the bravado and how well they're doing. Instead, dear friends, instead of the party making fundamental changes, the plantation owners remain firmly in charge, much to the party's demise. Once more, as we prepare for general elections in 2020, the situation remains the same. Love boxes have been added to the list of evidence of just how much the plantation owners care for the Vincentian electorate. But it is the electorate that must judge for themselves whether they believe and accept these gifts as evidence of genuine agape, real love, or mere trinkets aimed at garnering votes on election day. The electorate it is that must judge for themselves whether they believe and accept these gifts as evidence of genuine agape, or items that are reflective of a stance that suggests Vincentians only remember their last meal, and that such an approach is sure to garner votes. How are the love boxes any different from the lumber, galvanized steel, and cement distributed close to general elections? How are the love boxes any different from the rallies that are really large fetes, highlighted not so much by the content of the speeches, but more so by the international acclaim of the artists? The plantation owners have this time around gone above and beyond in their promises. They have promised hotels galore, and this after doing little or nothing to construct any or woo any in the near 10 years of constructing the Argyle International Airport. Suddenly, dear friends, suddenly love is in the air. Elections are pending, and hotels are literally oozing out of thin air. In an elections year, the moribund plantation owners are telling the electorate that they are even borrowing money from Taiwan, the perennial country to which we appear surrogate, to build a hotel for the Marriott chain to manage. The plantation owners are so moribund, so deficient in new ideas, that they are still at the stage where they believe that name-dropping matters to the electorate. Hence, we are being told about Marriott and Holiday Inn Express. But as if the foregoing is not enough, we are onto the new city at Arnesville. The near dearth of critical thinking and the willing surrender to the hubris of the plantation owners have led the latter to focus on megalomania, something the left once heavily criticized around the Caribbean. Today, however, retaining power is what matters, not one's political philosophy, not one's political ideology. The most recent expose has been the offering to the electorate of a new hospital and a new parliament, a new Hall of Fame. The electioneering value of the foregoing is clear. The electorate is aware of the crass inadequacies of the Mintel Cato Memorial Hospital. The offer of building a new hospital is attractive to the electorate whenever it is mentioned. Unfortunately, because people are always concerned about their health and afraid of dying for want of medical care, the idea of a new hospital is always appealing. But a new hospital makes no difference in the long run if we do not analyze and understand the problems attendant to the existing Milton Cato Memorial Hospital system of operation. What are the inadequacies there? And why are these inadequacies recurring? Will anything be different if we build a new hospital under the current dispensation, political party, and plantation owners? The only difference with a new hospital may well be that it is another new building. If we do not get state-of-the-art equipment, we will end up with the same inadequacies and frustrated medical personnel. If we continue to have nurses graduate annually, but the best qualified are not employed, and end up having to leave because a minister of health declared that at the start of their training they were told that they will not all gain employment, what difference would a new hospital make? Placing emphasis on the construction of a new hospital in the midst of a health pandemic makes good election sense. It has immense vote-catching potential for the ruling regime, and this may be the main reason for bringing it into focus. The plantation owners may well have forgotten that while they may have been emphasizing the age and location of the Mintel Cato Memorial Hospital as critical hindrances to the institution's performance, the electorate already know the truth. The experiences of patients are consistently being told on social media and on the daily talk shows on radio stations committed to the truth. If employment is going to be reflective of the political biases and tribalism, then no amount of new buildings for health would make a difference to the quality of the performances therein. Of course, in the midst of what appears to be a megalomania glut in an elections year, where the plantation owners are going all out, and suddenly, in the midst of a health pandemic, money appears to be no option for projects, the latest idea is the construction of a new parliament building. Thankfully, the newspaper remains focused on governance issues in SBG. They have taken up the issue of the Hall of Justice. And it's interesting that the Hall of Justice, the proposal is for it to be constructed on land for which the owners have yet to be paid, despite the rulings of the nation's court. Amazing, isn't it? The idea of constructing a Hall of Justice now is reflective of the importance of an elections victory to the plantation owners. Talking of constructing a Hall of Justice, whilst the world is in the throes of one of the worst health pandemics, and given that we are not yet out of the woods, reflects the priority options of the plantation owners. It appears that what is more important to the plantation owners is yet another edifice that would leave the electorate in awe at the mere sight, rather than ensuring that there are adequate measures in place should the COVID-19 turn around in SVG and wreak havoc. The plantation owners think only of power, political power. Marcus de Freitas' fight for justice eventually led to him having been awarded some $4.1 million by the High Court. Yet, let the electorate understand clearly how the plantation owners love people. Are Marcus de Freitas and his family the beneficiaries of labor's love? Even after justice has been served at the level of the court, the plantation owners, in their own determination, are yet to make good the payment ordered by the High Court. And why? What kind of love had the ruling regime displayed in respect of Marcus de Freitas? How is it possible to at once speak about love and in the same breath ignore the ruling of a High Court? Importantly, Gonzalez often reminds the electorate of his decades of experience as a practicing lawyer. Yet, even as a lawyer, he is leading an administration that acquired de Freitas' property in 2004, 16 years ago. The court ruled in 2008, a mere 4 years later. Yet today, 12 years later, the ULP administration, bold-facedly and shamelessly, informs the nation of its intention to construct a hall of justice in a pandemic on lands for which it is yet to pay even after a High Court ruling in de Freitas' favor. Real nice. We ask you, dear friends, to analyze this truth and to determine for yourselves what one is to do with all that the plantation owners keep telling us about their love for us, about their love for the society. All of the purveyors of Christian values, the regurgitation of biblical verses mean nothing if in practice we do not display that love. It is not how often you say, "I love you," that matters. It is how often those whom you claim to love see that love practiced in everything that you do. The Vincentian electorate must search their own consciences, analyze, critically analyze, and see through the conduct of the plantation owners. Understand why some have to daily reach out to the media to preach their loyalty of the plantation owners, to continue to sow discord, to divide the nation, to destroy other people's characters, to label people so despicably, day after day after day, in an effort to do what? Maintain effective control on the main levers of Vincentian society. Understand, dear listeners, the dynamics that allow us to say without fear of contradiction that plantation society is today alive and well in St. Vincent and the Grenadines under the Unity Labour Party. Only the plantation owners and their minions are apparently worthy of survival. Only they are apparently worthy of development. Everything is theirs, as if by some warped sense of righteous indignation and entitlement. The COVID-19 pandemic has emerged as a major platform for the government to make significant financial offers to the electorate. But can these gifts be divorced from the ULP and the strategic importance to the pending general elections? Is it possible to separate what the government is giving away in the name of assistance to the disadvantaged resulting from the pandemic and what the ULP is doing to better position itself for the pending general elections? The plantation owners cannot afford to lose, and that is a predicament. History has shown the electorate enough reason to lose confidence, not just in the ruling regime, but in the entire electoral system as currently obtained. The revelations that have already been made in the case of the opposition petitions, the information that have come to light, have left much of the electorate decidedly bothered about our elections and our electoral system. It does not matter whether or not international observers are brought in for elections. The courtroom revelations during the petitions may well have served to expose the sheer folly and waste of funds in having observers. They make absolutely no difference. As for the politicians of the region, they are in one sordid barrel of hopelessness. Each one caught up in his or her own hubris, seemingly believing that they are the rightful heirs of the plantation owners of their respective countries, dating back to conquest. Dating back to conquest. Enough said. But you know, dear friends, again we remind you about the disappearance of J8VAX in 2006. It was piloted by Dominic Gonzalez with Rashid Ibrahim on board. It has been many years, but we keep it here 4,936 days later. It is also 3,626 days since the disappearance of another SVG aircraft, J8SXY, piloted by Suraj Lakram, as he went out on a mercy mission, called out from home on Thursday, the 5th of August, 2010, just under 4 years after the disappearance of J8VAX. Both and their occupants disappeared without a trace. Without a trace. We remind you, as always, on the 19th of September 2008, Patricia Bowman crushed in her own car on her way to work, just literally a few yards from her workplace. But justice is said to be blind. It has to be for us to have a situation like this in a Christian society where no one has claimed responsibility. And what a remarkable society. Plantation Society, SVG 2020. Enough said. You've been listening to another edition of Nice Radio's Callaloo presentation, Just Another Look. Just Another Look is an innovative, exciting, albeit decidedly provocative, and yes, certainly controversial, socio-political analysis of issues of a local, regional, and international nature. Just Another Look is heard only on Nice Radio, first aired on Saturdays at 6 p.m. with repeat broadcasts on Sundays at 9 p.m. Remember, you can catch us on the World Wide Web, www.niceradio.info. You can check out our Just Another Look blog, and of course, you can catch us on YouTube. I am, of course, Keith Joseph.